This is Dr. Pomeroy, and today we're going to talk about cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is very important for cells. It's the way that they take in big chunks of energy and make it into little tiny chunks of energy that are useful for them. This right here represents glucose, 686 kilocalories per mole of energy. Now, if this cell right here was to go ahead and take in all this glucose and use it all at once, it would explode. This is just too much. This is like using an atom bomb to fuel a car. So the cell has to break it up, and it has a couple of systems. It has 4 particular systems in order to break this up and use the bonds in each of the 6 carbons that are linked together. It uses those bonds to make energy, or it derives energy from it. So here's glucose. Glucose goes into the cell. Let's open up our cell and see what we've got in there. And in fact, let's start off by talking about what happens at the very end. In the very end, we start off with this glucose 6 carbon molecule, and we end up getting ATP. ATP is the gasoline. It's the gasoline of the cells. It's what makes the cell run. The cell has to do a lot of repairs. It's got a lot of things to do. It's got to make new DNA. It's got to make new proteins. It's got to make amino acids. It's got to repair the cell membranes. And to do that, it uses ATP. 1 glucose molecule, 6 carbons. You use the bonds between the 6 carbons, and you get 38 ATPs on the average. Well, how does it go from the 6 carbon glucose to 38 ATPs? We'll show you. First of all, the glucose in the cytosol, there's enzymes that go through a reaction that is called glycolysis, which is the breakdown of sugar. Lysis, the breakdown. When we put 1 glucose molecule through glycolysis, the enzymes inside will give us 2 smaller molecules. These represent pyruvate. Pyruvate has 3 carbons each. So we've taken this 6 carbon glucose and made 2 3-carbon pyruvates. In addition to the pyruvates, we've got some beginning forms for energy. First of all, we generate 2 NADHs. And NADHs can be used later on in what's called the ETC, or electron transport chain, to make ATPs. We also get, through glycolysis, energy that the cell can use. These 2 little blue M&Ms represent ATP. So from the glucose molecule, we get 2 ATPs, 2 NADHs, which we'll use later, and 2 pyruvate molecules. Now the cell can use these pyruvate molecules in another reaction. This reaction is called pyruvate decarboxylation. And this is what happens to the pyruvate in order to get it inside of the mitochondria. And to get it inside of the mitochondria, it has to go through a series of reactions. And the net result of this series of reactions is each of these 3-carbon pyruvates get converted to 2 2-carbon molecules called acetyl coenzyme A. These can get into the mitochondria to be broken down later. But when it does this, you might ask yourself, wait, we only have 4 carbons here. What happened to the other 2 carbons that were in the pyruvate? Here they are. They get converted into CO2. This is what you breathe out. The reason you breathe out CO2 is because as your body metabolizes things like glucose, it gives off CO2. Now it's used the bonds, though, that once hooked these 2 carbons together to get some energy. And that energy that it got are 2 NADHs, which can be used later to generate ATPs. Zeus here finds that very interesting, as do I. Now what's going to happen to these acetyl-CoAs? Well, the next step that's going to happen to acetyl or acetyl-CoA is they're going to go into another cycle. They can get into the mitochondria and they go through the tricarboxylate acid cycle, which is also called the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. So these 2 acetyl-CoAs of 2 carbons each go into the Krebs cycle, and the enzymes in the mitochondria give us a net reaction. First of all, we're going to break apart those carbons. Remember, these were 2 carbon molecules, and there were 2 of them. So we're going to get 4 CO2s. We've broken apart those molecules. Remember, we got 2 CO2s previously. That's all 6 carbons that were in the glucose. What's it done with that energy? With that energy, it's made some molecules. It has, first of all, made NADH, and it's made 6 NADH molecules that later can be used in the electron transport chain to make ATP. It's also generated 2 ATPs that it can use for energy. And there's another molecule that is very similar to NADH, FADH2. This can also be used in the next step, the electron transport chain, to make more ATP. So when we have all of that NADH and FADH2, it can go into, on the mitochondrial membrane, a cycle called the electron transport chain, or ETC. And the net result of this ETC, there's a cascade of events that work into yielding 34 ATPs. Now remember, previously we had 2 ATPs that we got over here from glycolysis, and we had another 2 ATPs that we got in the Krebs cycle, making on average a total of 38 ATPs that we got from the 6 carbon glucose, as well as we got 6 CO2s. The cell basically took the energy in those bonds and is using those to make ATP that can be used in the cell. And it's used in the cell in linked reactions, where the final phosphate on that ATP, it's like a loaded spring, that can be used to cause enzymes or proteins to react, to make new proteins, to make new amino acids, to make new DNA. And that is Cellular Respiration by Dr. Pomeroy.